back. We're going to jump right in. We've got a great guest today. We have the governor of Arizona, Mr. Doug Ducey.
The Deuce is in the house. I can't believe this. This is like a long time goal of ours. When we first started this idea of the podcast, we're like, you think Ducey will come on? No, he'll never come on this thing.
Of course.
And here you are.
All you guys had to do was ask.
Here you
I'm
are.
happy to be here.
We wanted to wait to ask until we actually
Well,
felt
we
like
needed
were,
great surroundings, right?
Well, great surroundings. We have a great studio worldwide.
This is a great studio.
Star Worldwide Networks.
Very
Dave
impressive.
Pratt has been, and you know Dave. He's a
everybody
phenomenal
knows
guy.
Dave.
Well,
He's the
everybody
mayor.
knows. He's the mayor.
Yeah.
Mayor
He lived on
Palooka.
top of the AE Pie House my senior year at ASU, and I didn't get to know him then, but later he showed up at one of my son's flag football games, and it just so happened that his son was also on the team. They just transferred to the school, so I got to know him as an adult. He's actually an incredibly responsible human being. I hope I'm not hurting his
It may be
image
hurting his
here.
image. I don't know. I mean, he's
Great
definitely
dad, great husband,
Incredibly
wonderful guy.
responsible human being with the Sex Machine Band.
A lot different than the Red Rocker.
Yeah. Well, when we were growing up, it was everybody wanted to be.
Well,
Dave
you
Pratt.
don't realize when you're 16 years old and you're listening to Dave Pratt that he's 21, 22.
Yeah, I mean,
he's not much older than you
he
are.
was having a lot
and
of
he's
fun.
interviewing Bono. And you're
Right.
like, can I be in the studio right now?
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's great to have you, Governor. People ask you policy questions. They ask you, political questions. They ask you about the office, whatever. What I wanted to ask you was, how does a guy that's a successful career at P&G, Procter & Gamble, end up in Arizona running an ice cream store?
Well, my folks split up my junior year of high school, and my mom moved out west. So I was in a different position where I had to pay for my own schooling, and I was the oldest of three. And I had a great college counselor at St. John's Jesuit in Toledo. I was likely going to go to Ohio State or Miami of Ohio, and he pointed at a map at Arizona State University in Tempe. He said it's affordable. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and I literally drove from Toledo to Tempe. I'd never been there. I didn't know one person. I wasn't that happy about it at the time, but it was one of those things in life where I think it really opened a lot of doors. I was able to get a fresh start, and when you go away to school, especially when you have to pay for it, you get resourceful real quick. And I will say in-state tuition in those days was, I think it was like less than $800 a year. Now, I wasn't in-state. I had enough money for that first year, but by second semester I had achieved residency, and I'm still thankful to the ladies that made that decision. And I was working there, I was living there. I had pulled up all stakes in Toledo, and I had all the receipts and information that you need, but that changed my life dramatically when I was an in-state resident and could stay at Arizona State.
And then, did you go straight to P&G after graduation?
So I worked my way through Arizona State University at the Greyhound station there, working for a guy named John Pecoraro, who is still a dear friend. And then I got the job at Hensley & Company.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was a great job. It paid $450 a month in 1982 and $50 cash every Monday. And Anheuser-Busch at that time was one of the great American institutions. The rollout of Bud Light happened while I was working there, and those were the good old days in the beer business. It was Bud, Miller, and Coors. We didn't have domestics. We didn't have competition. We didn't have international brands or any of these new flavors.
This is the most we've talked about beer.
I know.
Light beer, dark
But
beer.
the light beer, it's appropriate. I was in the Spuds McKenzie outfit at ASU. Thank goodness there was no pictures of that. It would have been used against me during the campaign. Maybe I would have won by more. But
I was talking with John Vanderveer about a couple weeks ago, and I'm sure there's pictures somewhere that he has.
And it was just such a great organization. I didn't realize the high regard that August Busch III held Hensley in, and we won Brew Crew every year, which was the best college rep program in the country. And really our job, although it was a fun job, our job was to educate people. I mean, Anheuser-Busch took a position that they wanted beer to be the beverage of moderation, and at the time, hard liquor was really getting hit. It was not allowed to be advertised on the air and was under a lot of scrutiny for regulations, and they came up with things like know when to say when, designated driver programs, and alternative beverages, those types of things. And I think by and large, the beer industry, though much different today, has maintained that to a large degree.
To a large degree, but I mean, a lot of it, what's happening now is you mentioned the growth of craft brewers and especially local craft. Everything's local
God bless
now.
them. God
Yeah,
bless
no,
them.
we've got some great local crafts here
for sure.
and in Tucson.
Four
and-
Peaks is an amazing success story.
Well, they're no longer considered craft, you know that,
I
because
know.
Anheuser-Busch bought them.
Well, that's how successful they
But,
are.
Yeah,
but they
that's-
did start out, with
Yeah.
with a couple good recipes,
Yeah.
and they've had a ton of success. I'm happy for them. And then there's the guys that are open up, the day before yesterday, and they have big dreams too.
Yeah, so I think there's like 6,000 craft breweries now.
Wow.
And unfortunately with that is you out of the 6,000, probably 10% are any good, and out of the 10%, probably 5% might make it.
There's bad
And-
beer.
and there is
Oh,
bad beer.
I haven't tasted it.
There is bad beer, unfortunately.
like
Unless
I've
unless
had
you have
beer
a
that
really good
isn't cold
restaurant.
enough. I just haven't had any bad.
Unless you have a
Yeah.
really good restaurant. But
That's awesome.
but yeah, the light. I mean, that's why we have the name of our podcast, Light Beer, Dark Mind, because for a while, I mean, we were selling tons of light beer. Now that seems to be not so in
Is it
vogue.
passe?
No, I mean the top brands in America are still Bud Light, Miller Lite, Coors Light, and Michelob Ultra. I mean, pretty much in that order, along with Budweiser. So it's a different world, but the business isn't growing really.
Now they put the brand name on just about anything.
Yeah.
I mean, to see the Bud Light
Seltzers
brand
and
on
everything.
seltzer, and I don't think that would ever happen under August the 3rd.
No, probably not. Probably not.
So there's a really interesting factoid. I mean, I view your tenure as governor as one that's been a great success. And
Tell the media.
yeah, well, and here's the thing: is that we've never in Arizona, we basically have never been able in modern history to actually see someone run for office, make promises, get elected, and then serve 2 terms to fulfill those promises. I mean, you may not realize this, Chris, but the Governor Ducey, will be the first initially elected full 2-term governor in the history of Arizona since 1967, when Jack Williams served as governor.
Wow. No, I did
Well, I
not
haven't
realize
finished
that.
the second term yet.
Well,
Sean.
knock on wood. Right? That's true. Because Bruce Babbitt, took over because Wesley Bolin died, because Raul Castro had died, so the Secretary of State Wesley Bolin became governor, then Wesley Bolin dies, so then it goes to Attorney General, who was Bruce Babbitt. It just is amazing to me when you look at our history. We don't have governors who finish the job, and now we do. Please stay.
I intend to finish. I want to finish strong. It is a great job. I mean, being governor is a great job. I haven't had many jobs in politics, but I can't think of a better one. You're home in the morning. You're home at night. You're the chief executive officer of the state. And Arizona is such a great place. I don't know in other places around the country where there's an establishment or a good old boys club or a status quo. Arizona, because so many people move here from other places, a complete outsider and newcomer can achieve this position. And once you achieve the position, you can really get stuff done if you have an agenda. So I've enjoyed every moment of it beyond COVID. But the
Right.
job of the governor. And I'm proud of where Arizona is, and I think we have a ton of momentum. I think we're not just in store for a boom year. I think we're in store for a boom decade.
And I think that people underestimate how much leadership matters when it comes to setting the tone to allow the economy to boom. I mean, there are a lot of politicians say, "I'm going to create this many jobs. But it's really, I'm going to do the things that allow
That's all
the economy."
BS.
Yeah,
These guys, it always happens during the silly season. But anybody that's come from the private sector knows that the governor doesn't create jobs, and neither does anybody else in politics. But you can create the environment in which jobs are created. That idea of getting the bureaucracy out of the way, lowering taxes, reducing regulations, and then allowing the dynamism of free enterprise to happen. And I think we've seen that in spades in Arizona.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, regardless of the tax policy that you pursue, the regulatory relief that your administration has pursued from the very beginning has been dramatic.
I mean, very big. I mean,
Yeah,
day one.
I mean, day one there was executive orders. I remember executive orders going out saying, we're going to evaluate all this, and no new regulations were going to be enacted without authority. So I think it's been tremendous for the state from the very beginning.
I think in my first State of the State, I took that quote from Conscience of a Conservative, Barry Goldwater, that he ran not to pass laws, but to repeal them.
Yeah.
I wish we did have more repealing of laws, more sunsets on laws. I think it's one thing. We'd have better federal and state policy. But it took us about 18 months, even with the unbelievable team I've been able to work with in the governor's office and how talented they are. It took us about 18 months to figure out how many regulations we have in Arizona. And
it's amazing.
It took that long, about 11,000 existing regulations. We've been able to eliminate over 2,000 of them.
Wow.
I mean, they're just gone. They're off the books. Each one of that is like a tax reduction. It's the equivalent of $171 million tax reduction without costing the general fund $1. And I hear all the time from entrepreneurs and business leaders that are operating in Arizona that we're the best state in the country in which to do business. That's why we're beating Texas, we're beating Tennessee, we're beating Florida in so many of these competitive situations like Taiwan Semiconductor, Lucid, Nikola, on down the line.
Yeah.
Well, the growth of
they get all the press, it seems like. Seems like Nashville, Texas, Florida gets all the press, and yet what we've done here has been just as dramatic, if not more.
Well, I think a lot of our press is part of the blame Arizona First crowd. It is amazing to me. It's one thing when they're hitting us on not having any jobs beyond construction and call centers, which was fairly accurate in 2014. But something like Taiwan Semi, and I don't know if you guys have been up there in North Phoenix to see it. This is probably the most consequential economic development win for a state in the last 20 years, and it's incredibly important to our national security.
Absolutely.
It could have gone anywhere in the country. Everybody wanted it. Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Ross, and Secretary Esper were all kind of wrestling for credit because it's around defense, it's around commerce, and of course internationally this semiconductor supply chain is critical. And these fabs are 667,000 square feet, and they're building 20 of them.
Yeah,
it's mind-boggling.
It's unbelievable. It's going to transform the state. It's going to create a hub here for that type of technology, more so than we've seen in the past with Intel and and others.
High-tech, high-paying jobs, and there will be supply chain and distribution. And now we really are in the catbird seat in these competitions. Our pipeline's never been more full. So in many ways, I think you ain't seen nothing yet in terms of the momentum that's happening here. And with that growth comes some responsibility in terms of action. We're going to widen the I-10, the I-17. There's other projects that are happening. But I heard from many of our mutual friends in 2014 that we're going to support you. We love living here. We're not moving. But my son or daughter who graduated from you name the university can't find a job here to support their degree. And it's been 5 years since we've heard that.
Yeah, major victory for you, Governor, and for the legislature. I-10 between Phoenix and Casa Grande is finally being widened.
Right. And
I mean,
good news
in my
Tucson,
former
too.
life, I have traveled that thing so treacherously at nights and everything else, and one accident, and you're done. It's over.
Shuts it down.
Yeah.
It's over for the morning. It's over for most of the afternoon. So
Construction is going to start in 2023, and the drumbeat here was loud, but it really was Tucson, Pima County, Southern Arizona. It was like we need this, and now we're going to be able to deliver on it.
well, in Pinal County, I mean, they bear the brunt of it, and so do the the reservation community on both sides. So it's important.
Yeah, we had Gila River there and Governor Lewis, and he's been very helpful on all these projects. And that's the responsibility of government. I mean, that's something government should be doing rather than trying to do what DC's doing and monitoring everybody's life and conversations. They're supposed to build infrastructure.
Well, apparently the CDC was monitoring all of us
Yeah,
during the
Google
pandemic,
data.
where we were going, what we were seeing.
Well, I'm sure we can
Maybe
get
not
into-
what we were eating, but you never know.
Yeah, well, let's not talk about that. I mean, we can talk about it. But one of the things I want to ask is, so you have had a great track record here in Arizona, and you were selected by your peers to be the head of the Republican Governors Association. I think it makes a lot of sense because you can give other governors a roadmap. I mean, here you are nearing the end of your tenure, and you've got younger guys and people that you're trying to help get elected. How do you view the importance of that role as you are coming to the end of your tenure?
Well, the RGA is critical for governors. I mean, for me, it was so helpful in not only winning the general election, but once I was a new governor, I mean, you are a freshman. You're an incoming freshman. There's a huge learning curve, and to be able to sit next to people like Scott Walker and Mike Pence and Chris Christie and Bill Haslam and learn from them. I was coming back with yellow pads full of notes saying, hey, we've got more to do, wanting to take the good ideas that we saw in other states and apply them in Arizona. Today, I'd like to think we're much more of an exporter of good ideas and good policy, whether it's universal recognition of occupational licenses or telehealth or the American Civics Act are all things that Arizona has led on. And then there's the political component of the RGA. And it's really all a Republican governor has is their support base in their home state and the RGA. The other side has George Soros, Tom Steyer, Michael Bloomberg, the Teachers Union, Planned Parenthood, Emily's List, NARAL, the SEIU. The list goes on and on. It's an inexhaustible river of resources that our opponents have. And we've demonstrated you don't need more resources. You need good candidates and good policies. And if there was any silver lining in COVID, it was that the country finally saw the real difference between red states and blue states. And wow, we're going to protect our incumbents this cycle. We're going to keep our red states red, but we're on offense all over the country, displacing Democratic governors who shut their schools down, who crushed small businesses, who put out unnecessary mask and vaccine mandates. And they've got a lot of people that haven't been involved in politics that are damn angry about it and want to make a change.
So, well, and I think we saw that in your leadership is to be applauded, what happened in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin getting elected.
It's real evidence of the momentum that we have, the wind that's behind us. Here Glenn Youngkin is an outsider, a true newcomer, a successful business individual that actually had to win a pretty difficult primary, running against a quasi-incumbent.
Does that sound familiar?
Running against a quasi-incumbent with 100% name ID in a blue state that Joe Biden won by 10 points. Yeah. And think about the agenda Glenn had. I mean, it was real common sense, kitchen table stuff like that you should be allowed to be involved in your child's school. And Terry, shouting him down in that debate. And I think that really the opportunity for Republican governors, in addition to lowering taxes, lightening regulations, all the playbook that makes for a dynamic state, is this idea of addressing K-12 education, of giving power back to the parents and the families to make decisions. In many ways, America never really ever solves a problem. It innovates out of it. And school choice is the innovation out of the problem that we have in these failed public schools, especially in our inner cities.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I was going to ask about, so you've done so much for the RGA, but there's also a National Governors Association. And I want to get your perspective on, we keep talking about the pivot. When do we think some of these Democratic candidates, governors might pivot to more centrist policies, especially when it comes to COVID, economic policies? What sort of discussions take place in those National Governors Association meetings where, do you get pulled aside by some of your Democratic colleagues and say, hey, I'm trying to pivot, or I want to do something different, and I want to know how you did it? I know you have relationships with many of them.
So governors are, by and large, pretty collegial.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all problem solvers. We're all CEOs of our own state, and we're known in our own state, but anonymous outside, unless somebody runs for president. I mean, most people wouldn't recognize other states' governors. But some things have changed in the National Governors Association. I did find value in it. And I will say, when there's a wildfire, Gavin Newsom sends firefighters from California. So does Jared Polis from Colorado. But you remember not that long ago, there was somebody who was tagged as a failed governor from a small state who rose to the presidency, and he was actually considered pretty darn good on the economy. Well, that was Bill Clinton. Right now, it seems like the Democratic governors around the country are taking a playbook from big city mayors in terms of their policies. And Ronald Reagan said, had the Pilgrims landed on the West Coast, they would have never bothered to discover the rest of the country. Yet today you see an exodus from California.
Yeah.
It's no less beautiful than it was when Ronald Reagan was there, but it's a lot less safe. There's a lot less opportunity, and I think people are fleeing because there's a lack of quality of life.
Yeah, no question.
Well, and you're seeing that in Illinois, you're seeing that in New York, and it doesn't seem like there's any type of pivot, which is my point.
Well, remember when Andrew Cuomo was the media darling,
Yes,
and he was doing those press conferences every day, and somebody asked him about the people that were fleeing New York and going to Florida, and he said, I'm going to have them over for dinner. I'm going to cook. I'm going to, like on the power of his personality, he's going to persuade people to not move. All he has to do is lower taxes.
Yeah.
Lighten regulation, beef up the police force so people feel safe in their home and apartment. And it is shocking to me because I don't think that those are necessarily or were necessarily Republican ideas. Today, being supportive of law enforcement is seen as a Republican or conservative idea. I've not met anybody that wants to feel unsafe in their home or see some of this rampant crime that you see where the prosecutor says we're not going to prosecute anyone that steals less than $1,000. So people go out and fill bags up to $999 and walk out of Walgreens with impunity. It's crazy.
Well, welcome to San Francisco or downtown Los Angeles.
Well, and when you look at people like Cuomo and Newsom, I mean, it is astounding to me. Well, I mean, just a good example, the difference with people leaving New York to go to Florida or California, come to Arizona. New York is a little bit smaller than Florida population-wise, right? Their state budget is 3 times larger than the state of Florida. Florida's budget is about $100 billion, and New York's is $300 billion.
Just think of the amount of fat that you could cut in New York. You know, even in Arizona, which has been considered a lean state, a conservative state, we were able to cut our budget in that first year because we had a deficit, $1 billion, which is no easy task on an $8 billion budget, but we were able to do it. We've got 400,000 additional jobs here since 2015. The state's growing 52% in population in the last generation, yet we have fewer people working in state government than we did when I came in.
That's amazing.
And we've added, of course,
That's
cops,
a miracle.
child safety workers, but what we've thinned out is the bureaucracy, the administration. 24% of the state's workforce was due for retirement in that first 4 years. So we put the hiring freeze. If somebody needed more people, they had to make the case for it face to face, like Frank Milstead, who was our colonel at the Department of Public Safety, said we need more cops if we're going to do the border strike force. Greg McKay at Child Services said we need more social workers if we're going to take care of those kids. We hired there, we thinned the administration and bureaucracy, and today we're leaner and more effective. It can be done.
Yeah, like I said, this is a great example of watching someone from the beginning right up to hopefully the end. And we just haven't seen that in Arizona. I mean, other states get a chance to do that, but like I said, since 1967.
That's amazing.
In my lifetime.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Governor, you mentioned the border strike force. Why don't you give us a little update on the border and what you see, what the truth is? We hear what the media tries to portray what's going on the border, but I know for a lot of business people, especially in southern Arizona, it's a major issue. It doesn't seem like southern Arizona politicians are really willing to tackle it, but you are.
Well, it is a major issue, and people are going to see what an issue it is come November. I've served under 3 presidents. Joe Biden is by far the worst. Barack Obama deployed the National Guard to the southern border in a time of crisis. Jerry Brown, under Donald Trump, deployed the National Guard. And here today, Arizona and Texas have deployed their National Guard using state funds. The federal government is nowhere to be found. Joe Biden's never even been to the southern border. For Kamala Harris, the self-appointed border czar, this is another laughing matter. And you saw Secretary Mayorkas literally have his own federal agents turn their back on him when he came here. So we are in real crisis. It's a serious issue. The reason we were able to stand up the American governor's border strike force is because this isn't just an Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, California issue. You know, one warm memory that I have was when I was running in 2014. I went around the country and met with Mitch Daniels and Scott Walker and Chris Christie and said I was thinking about running for governor, and I wanted to pick their brain. And each one of them would ask, what are the big issues in Arizona? And I'd say, well, it's the economy, education, and the border. And I still remember Chris Christie laughing out loud saying, the border's not much of an issue in New Jersey. Well, today
it is now.
Today it is. I mean, people see the deaths from fentanyl, and it's heartbreaking that fentanyl is coming over our southern border, that the cartels are actually shaping the policy of what's happening on the border, and the federal administration is nowhere to be found. So in Arizona, we are putting resources down there. We are standing up a fight. But if our entire southern border is not secure, neither is our nation. These cartels are the worst people in the world, but they aren't dummies.
Yeah.
So if we've got additional resources on our border, they go to New Mexico. And that's not even being discussed by Lujan Grisham in New Mexico. And I think she's going to pay a price for it in November.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question. The it strikes me as amazing how, I mean, I don't know. I maybe because Joe Biden, I knew him. I didn't know him. I watched him as a senator, as I was a Hill staffer, and he was a little bombastic and wordy, but he felt pretty middle of the road for the most part. I feel like he's either gone left or he's been captured by the hard left, and maybe he's not totally aware. But it seems to me that the overreach by the Democrats has created an insane opportunity, which I will fully admit Republicans are, fully capable of blowing.
We have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory before, haven't we?
Yes. That is our motto.
Not so much
apparently.
the governors, but I
Right.
think you see that in some of the larger Senate races.
No question. And obviously it matters who, candidates matter. That's just an age-old thing that actually is true.
And campaigns.
And campaigns matter. I have, before a couple days ago, I would have said it was going to be a blowout across the board. We now have this leak of this Supreme Court decision that is headed down the pike on Roe v. Wade. No surprise. I mean, if you look at Twitter, you'd think the world just exploded out of this total shock. But anyone who's been watching the court, watching the arguments, Roe v. Wade was going to get overturned. I mean, that was going to happen in this court. I don't know why that seems like such a surprise. And there's a lot of people saying, oh, this is going to save the Democrats. I really feel like while there might be some additional turnout in some places, this is ultimately going to be about pocketbook issues. And, the abortion as the number one issue with voters is probably 5% on the left and 5% on the right.
Well, I think the best day of the Biden presidency was Inauguration Day, because it was the only day that he talked about the person you described, that was someone that did want to be more middle of the road and bring folks together. I think he gave us a real signal. In fact, I normally don't watch Democratic debates, but when my peers asked me to lead the RGA, I thought I've got to have a better sense of what's going on in the opposition party. And if you remember in that, I think it was the first debate, one of the questions was, if you are president, will you allow illegal immigrants free health care?
Oh, yeah.
And every single Democrat raised their hand, including Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And I was shocked, because I didn't think that would be reflective of success in a general election campaign. So the cartels are not dummies. They're using that video to tell people that Joe Biden is welcoming them to the United States, and that demonstrates this open border policy. And then regarding this leak, listen, this was a memo that was written in February. It was a draft. No one really knows what's been written in the intervening months, and it was a leak. And let's say that the leak is accurate. Well, the court is basically going neutral on this,
right,
and it reverts to the states.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many potential judges I've interviewed as a governor, but it's been a lot. If it's been dozens and dozens, if not hundreds and hundreds, and everyone, Republican, Democrat, and Independent, will say that Roe v. Wade is bad law and weak reasoning. Now, many would then close that statement with, but I agreed with the result. Well, if they agreed with the result, that's their right, and now the decision on that result is going to happen at the state level, and we wouldn't have been at each other's throats for the past 50 years if that's how it was before they ever made the ruling, which was very much an activist ruling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. It's become this divisive issue exactly because of the ruling of Roe v. Wade originally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what I find interesting is that what the base leftist operatives are banking on is, well, we're going to scare women, but the people who are the most charged up about this, if you live in California, New Jersey, New York,
It's not going to affect them.
nothing is going to change.
Yeah,
nothing is going to change.
But yes, so they're raising money. It's all about raising money.
Interestingly,
yeah, it's all about raising money off of this.
Well,
and
they
But
are.
you
It
can see the activists. I mean, this is
but it seems
real
coordinated too.
anger. Yes.
I mean, it's just. I looked at what it wasn't surprising to me there was a leak. I kind of felt that something like this would happen.
See, I was shocked.
And then to see the coordination afterwards, that sort of solidified this idea that okay, this has been in the works for a little bit. You know, you don't just leak something to Politico and then all of a sudden all these other things kick into gear. But the other point I wanted to make is what has pushed us to this point though are red state governors enacting pro-family legislation. You're seeing it in Florida. You've seen it with this legislature this session. Some of the best pro-family legislation ever coming out of this legislature that you've signed.
I've been blessed with a legislature that is common sense, conservative. We've been able to get things done. I wish we had a little more of a governing majority. I want to hand the baton to a worthy successor.
But that's kind of the point.
And I want them to have a little bit more of a cushion in the House and the Senate. But we've been able to maintain those majorities through what have been a couple tough cycles for conservatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's kind of the point. Because the slim majorities, we've still seen, I think, some of the best legislation coming out of this legislature for families in quite some time.
I've been very blessed with good leadership in the chambers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you have had good leadership, and you know it's interesting because I look at what you've done, and obviously we're going to see more Republicans in the legislature redistricting that will have that result to some degree because we're growing as a state. I think we're actually growing more conservative. Despite what's happened at the Senate race level. And I feel like this is the first time in, I don't know how long, there's going to be a pass-off to the next governor of things are great. I mean, in some ways, I'd hate to be the next governor because you have created such a high bar that it's like, how do we keep this upward trajectory? And hopefully they'll follow your lead, whoever it is. But to me, you have created a high bar, and that's the first time in a long time in Arizona where someone has taken over a state that's in good shape.
Thank you.
Looking back though, the last 8 years, I mean, what has been the most difficult thing that you've had to deal with?
Well, beyond COVID,
Yeah.
I would say
That would be the most obvious answer.
the initial, you run for governor, and you've got to answer all these questions. You're seeing the questions that people are being asked right now on the campaign trail, and there were questions like that are the litmus test questions, and how, what's most important to the base, what's most important to the social conservatives, what's most important to the business community, what's most important to the Tea Party. And then if you're fortunate enough to get over the finish line in first place, you inherit a combined $40 billion budget, 220 boards and commissions, 35,000 state employees, and 48 agencies that report directly to you. And nobody asked you a question about any of it, the entire campaign. So what I would say is, if you remember that first month we hosted the Super Bowl, And I gathered all the agency heads together to talk about, hey, we're going to have government at the speed of business. And I came from the private sector, and we're going to know where the money is. You're going to have metrics on which to measure success. You're going to know what your mission is. And everybody's just staring back at me. It's complete silence in the
heck
room.
are you talking about?
And I can hear what they're thinking, and they're thinking, we're going to outlive you.
Yeah.
we were here before you got here, and we'll be here after you're gone. And then there was one individual in the room that made a decision before the Super Bowl to sting Uber and Lyft and shut them down.
I remember that, yes.
And we returned that individual to the private sector. And we actually collapsed
the world of opportunity.
We collapsed that agency, and I had people's attention in state government that we were going to make changes. We were going to hold people accountable. We were going to be serious about efficiency and effectiveness. And I am very proud of, government's there for a reason. And ask anybody who's in trouble on the freeway if they depend on the Department of Public Safety. Ask any one of these vulnerable kids who are in a position where they're removed from their home for whatever reason, if it's important that there's a loving home, foster parents and adoptive parents to help them. And we've got agencies that are leading on these fronts. I mean, Child Services was probably the most broken agency in the country now. And now both Greg McKay and Mike Faust are considered national spokespeople for how a foster care agency should operate.
Yeah. No, there's been some remarkable progress. What's been the best thing about being governor?
The best thing about being governor is that you wake up every day and anything that you want to affect, you can. You may not be able to change it. It may be outside of your purview as a chief executive in a system of co-equal branches, but you can address it. And in Arizona, because I think 73% of our adults came from somewhere else, nobody told me during the campaign, hey, things are great, don't change anything. Right. So we ran on a real agenda. I mean, we put that roadmap out there, and if you pull that roadmap out today, I keep one in my top drawer at the desk, you can pretty check off to some certain degree we have affected each of those issues across the board. And I ran on that agenda, but I also said I wanted to bring back American history and civics. Mm-hmm. And it was an applause line on the campaign trail. I was actually surprised none of my opponents copied it. It's not like it's an innovation to talk about American civics. And I actually was at one of these dinners.
They probably didn't even know what it was.
At the Joe Foss Institute, and they were talking about when there's a new, all three of us, fortunate enough to be born in this country.
Sure.
Probably the greatest gift that anyone can have on earth.
Right.
Well, if you are a naturalized legal immigrant, you have to take a test. It's a 100-question test. If I gave it to you guys right now, you'd get a 97 or 98 on it. I mean, without even studying, there's a couple really tough questions on it, but it's things like who's the father of our country? Who won the Civil War? How many branches of government? Fundamental stuff. And our kids didn't know this stuff. They weren't being tested on this stuff. So I ran on this law. It's called the American Civics Act. Arizona was the first state in the nation to pass the American Civics Act. I think 36 other states have now passed it. And a kid will not get their high school diploma unless they pass this. Now, there's more that needs to be done, but it's a great first step to have just some of the fundamental knowledge that you need to actually engage in the debate in the public square.
Well, this is great timing for you to raise this from the standpoint of an experience I just had. I was talking to a friend who is an attorney, and I had to explain that, because we're talking about the abortion issue, and they talked about democracy. I said, well, but we're not a democracy. We're, a constitutional republic. And I said, no, we're a democracy. I'm like, you don't vote personally on tax increases or on the budget for the Defense Department. You send someone to Congress to do that for you. You elect a governor to make they've taken con law. I mean, it's just like, it is amazing to me how, Well, I mean, it's
The lack of knowledge, the lack
yeah.
of real knowledge.
And
yeah.
and why you can blame the media to some degree. The Washington Post: democracy dies in the dark. We're not a freaking democracy, guys.
Yeah.
Constitutional republics die in the dark. You can say that. That makes more
Well,
sense.
and I
but-
do think, I mean, that's an argument that you can have. We're a form of democracy, but it's a representative republic is the form. It's worked rather well. We're the single greatest country in the history of the world. We've had a constitution for 245 years, and in many ways, I think the way out of the dilemma we're in right now is to look back to the Constitution. Washington, D.C. is just simply trying to do too much and does most of it bad. Why don't they focus on national security, foreign policy, securing the border, and maybe have an immigration debate, but separate it from the border, and push all the other stuff to the states. Let the states actually be laboratories of democracy. The government would be closer to the people. They'd be able to affect it. We'd have additional people running for state legislature and governor, and they'd be even making bigger and more consequential decisions. And that's the way the founders intended it. And now it's like the great American Super Bowl every 4 years. Who's going to be the president? And who's the president is certainly important, but it shouldn't be the single organizing issue in our nation.
That is a great point.
Well, and we know that you've been leading on this from the very beginning, and we really want to thank you for that.
Well, I really believe it. I think this idea of returning resources and programs to the state, we'd have a better country. We would lower the temperature on the political debate, and we'd have more people involved in public life and being citizens, actually being citizens.
Well, and the part of why, I mean, people have at times over the last 8 years, like, well, why do you like Doug Ducey? Why do you support him? And
it's been used against you a lot, so I feel bad.
Well, I'm sure I've been used against you too. But my, conversations we had long before you ran for office, you talked about wanting to give back. You talked about serving, and you've had success. You are exactly what the founders had in mind: a citizen legislator, or in this case, governor, who goes, serves their time, does a great job, and then leaves. I mean, I've assumed that you've never had aspirations for anything beyond governor. I've told people that, and I think it served you well because you knew what your goals were, what your agenda was. I think there's too many politicians who they lose sight of what they're supposed to be doing because, like, oh, how's this going to impact? I mean, look at Gavin Newsom. Guy desperately wants to be president. He's destroying California to try to appease, primary voters and caucus goers in Ohio or Iowa.
He's right on
Hampshire.
plan.
Right. Yeah. right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Governor. Thank you for being
Thanks
here.
for having me.
Thanks for your belief. In
now I know what I'm going to do next. When people ask me what I'm going to do next, I'm going to say I'm going to do a podcast.
Yeah, you should.
You would be great.
You would be great.
You can do it right here.
But our three pillars are faith, freedom, and free enterprise, and you've kept those pillars alive here in Arizona. We just want to thank you for your friendship. I've known you for now 15, 20 years now, and for all that you've done for the state.
Thank you very much.
And God bless you. And
God bless you.
And congratulations on your family stuff going on, and that's got to be really gratifying as well. So
thank you,
Thank you,
Sean.
Nestor. Great to have you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.